In recent months, the whole world has been living in anticipation of peace. At any moment now, the orange-haired golfer will put pressure on everyone and there will be calm and tranquility. After all, as Trump and his cronies assure us, Putin really wants peace. He can hardly eat, he wants it so much. He just needs to be buttered up a little.
Donald Trump is applauding Putin. I remember how Steve Witkoff, the special representative for Russia, would clutch his heart with joy at the sight of Vladimir Putin. He smiled and very actively showed his admiration.
We have bad news for the sleeping beauty in the Oval Office. Just as Putin couldn't take Kiev in 3 days, Donald won't achieve peace either. Not in 24 hours and not even in 24 months. Because Russia will never agree to a ceasefire. For Russia, peace means death. Putin's regime is now hooked up to the war like a life support machine. As soon as the war ends, the whole system will collapse and the country will begin to fall apart. 404.
No concessions, no surrendering our positions. There can be no talk of making any concessions on those key points necessary to solve the tasks before us, including in the context of the special military operation. I want to emphasize that the various elements of Anchorage themselves represent compromise solutions. The President of the Russian Federation has also spoken about this. This is the foundation against which we will measure ourselves.
The Kremlin has long since passed the point of no return and created a situation in which it cannot exist in peacetime. If the war comes to a sudden halt, Russia will experience the same thing as a loaded truck that slams on the brakes on a Crimean mountain road. The first to go flying, of course, will be the driver. He'll smash through the glass with his bald pale head and disappear into the unknown. Then the truck's wheels will come off and the trailer will detach.
Bye-bye, guys.
Even the most pro-Kremlin gung-ho patriots are horrified at the thought of peace and are asking themselves 3 fundamental questions. What will happen to an economy that's been built around war? What should be done with the million killers and looters who will return to Russia, motherland? And how do you explain to a population intoxicated by fascism that the goals of the special military operation have not been achieved and that Ukraine could not be subjugated?
These people are sitting on golden toilets. They hardly think about the fate of their own country.
As for the economy, after the war, Russia will face the 90s squared. Even now, almost every sector is in a severe crisis. The coal, metallurgical, and machine-building sectors are in a state of clinical death. Everything is still more or less holding together thanks to the military-industrial complex. But after the war ends, the free ride of bottomless government contracts and inflated salaries will be over. The last stronghold of Putinomics will collapse.
We are already seeing signs of crisis even in the military-industrial complex. Although it is precisely thanks to the military-industrial complex that the economic statistics are still tolerable, but those statistics are deceptive from start to finish. But even with its help, GDP can no longer be propped up. It still ends up at zero. In other words, this is stagnation. Economically, it's actually a crisis. If we look at the manufacturing sectors, specifically those producing goods and services for the population, the situation has been dire there for a long time. There is a sharp decline and a severe downturn.
If anyone in Russia is hoping that sanctions will be lifted after the war with the swamp, they shouldn't count on it. The main sanctions were imposed by Europe, and it will never recognize the occupied territories as Russian. So the economic noose will continue to deprive them of oxygen, Moscow. Probably by now, even the most fanatical Z-patriot no longer believes that the sanctions are beneficial.
The economic situation is bad and it's being concealed. For some reason, for reasons that aren't clear, we see that in order not to stir up the population or lead to apathy, there are some political psychological motives at play. Because, well, really, the economy is slowing down and it will keep slowing down throughout 2025, and quite seriously. It started getting bad in the summer and certain sectors are facing major difficulties.
Even if the US lifts the oil embargo, it will be very difficult to return to the market. The oil market is very dynamic. If you lose a client, they quickly find a replacement. And considering that America is a competitor to Russia in the hydrocarbon trade, it's not at all certain that there will be any easing of sanctions. So the picture for Russia after the war seems quite clear. Miners are smashing tiles on Red Square with their helmets, peasants are finishing off the last locusts in the fields, teachers are burning Medinsky's textbooks to heat the school, and scientists, just like in the good old days, are selling Turkish sweaters. Near the metro, the Golden Ring will be melted down, and Siberia will be leased to the Chinese for a truckload of dumplings. And all this time, pensioners are fighting for food at garbage dumps, although that's already happening now. But all the economic problems will seem insignificant to Russians compared to the return of the heroes of the special military operation, 1 million killers, looters, and war criminals who fought solely for money and now won't want to work as a tram driver for 20,000 rubles. Moreover, even the Z supporters themselves admit that the Russian army is basically a branch of a prison. Real prison rules and codes have taken hold there. Hundreds of thousands of criminals have been released from prisons and armed. And under the new law, criminals are drafted into the army even before they are convicted. Killed your neighbor, had a drink. Off to the special military operation. What a thrill. The ultra-patriots openly say that the Russian army is a rabble and riffraff.
People go there for the money, those in need go. There are deadbeat dads, people stuck in debt, drug addicts who get caught and are forced to sign a contract. In other words, it's the lowest strata of society. The army is just a rabble. That's how it is in the public consciousness, and that's the reality.
What do you think a person who's been through the war and already had a criminal past will do when he returns to civilian life? He's clearly not going to be growing tulips.
All these numerous people who have gotten their hands on various weapons, gone through the entire war, and some of whom possess a very serious criminal background, something truly significant has to be done with them.
It's time the Soviet Union was swept by a wave of banditry after the Afghan war. When former soldiers, trained to kill, banded together to engage in racketeering and other familiar activities from the 1990s. But back then, veterans of the Afghan war made up a tiny percentage of the huge USSR, while Russia's population is half as large, but there are about 20 times more war veterans now. Over 10 years, 600,000 people from across the Soviet Union served in Afghanistan. But now that many occupiers are present in Ukraine at the same time, more than 700,000. Millions have already passed through the front lines. As they say,
do the math, figure it out.
Can you imagine what will happen on the streets of Russia when all this so-called Holy Army comes back, drowning their traumatized minds in vodka? Even for an ordinary person, it's hard to return to normal life after a war. Now imagine hundreds of thousands of criminals with PTSD. Don't even try. It's impossible to imagine. A trip to buy bread in an average city will turn into a Mad Max-style adventure. Russians are already slowly starting to get used to this new reality. Over the years of full-scale war, our boys, according to official data alone, have killed more than 1,000 people in civilian life. Even more have been maimed and left disabled. And official data in Russia is always understated. Many of the crimes committed by the SVO Schnicki are covered up and hidden to avoid causing panic.
This Sinitsyn killed a woman here once. 2 children were left without a mother. He killed her brutally. He raped her. He gouged out her eyes. I don't know. He's just a monster.
In the city of Chebakul, a photo of a rapist and murderer was found on a display honoring war participants. He enlisted to go to the front straight from prison.
Post-war Russia will resemble a room packed with people, where everyone has been handed a knife and the lights have been turned off. Naturally, Putin is very afraid of this. He understands that his OMON, which is used to dispersing students and liberals, may, to put it mildly, not be able to handle a crowd of aggressive, hardened killers. And these killers will have more grievances against the authorities than the height of the Spasskaya Tower. The soldiers will remember the resetting of presidential terms and the abuse from their commanders. They'll ask, why isn't there a victory? Where is the promised greatness, and why have they stopped paying salaries?
But in the Ministry of Defense and in the Army, for me, for example, this is nonsense. That is when it's specifically the command staff, by force, they take away the soldiers' documents. As for why this is being done, honestly, nothing decent comes to mind. In other words, I can't think of any good reason for why this is happening. All I can say is that in my own, later on, or rather now there's a lot of information coming in that That's exactly how soldiers go missing. Their documents stay at headquarters, and then those documents are used to take out loans and leak information to the enemy. I really want to draw attention to this problem.
And that's when the war will finally affect everyone in the country. 404. But this time it'll be a civil war. There's another grim prediction for post-war Russia. By attacking Ukraine, the Kremlin has legitimized separatism within Russia itself. By seizing parts of Ukraine's territory under the pretext of some fake referendums, Moscow has opened an entire Pandora's box. Russia will start to fall apart almost immediately. There will be neither the strength nor the resources to stop it. Moreover, any region will have every right to independence, because the Russian constitution no longer applies. As soon as the occupied territories were incorporated into it in violation not only of international law but also Russian law, the constitution lost its legitimacy. In fact, Russia now has neither internationally nor domestically recognized borders. None at all. Simply put, none. Putin does not want any kind of peace, and he will do everything to prevent it. As long as he is alive, Russia will continue to wage war. Therefore, if the world wants peace, it must do everything possible to help Ukraine defeat the occupier on the battlefield.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.